Romans, just like the Greeks before, understood a key aspect in their fascinating relationship with the gods. The deities were not in control of everything. They could not change one's destiny entirely. The gods were not completely in control of their lives, yet they could leave an impact through world affairs. As we have and will see today, the intelligent and knowledgeable could use the gods for their own gain, to carve out their destiny, but in doing so, they were at times manipulating other classes of society, who gave as much faith into the gods as they had their own kings. In Greece, for example, a man named Tacitus is recorded by the historian Herodotus to have tricked the famous Athenians into giving him back his power after being exiled, because he made them believe that the goddess Athena had approved of his return. All he had to do was dress a woman named Phi in armor and ride around town in a beautiful chariot together. The people believed him to be having the gods' favor, so they made him their new leader. In Rome, the superstitions of the world were seen as the marks of a god's footprints, and as we will see today, the legions of the Roman Empire made their decisions based on what they found to be omens and signs from the gods through such odd events. Yet they worshipped and responded to what they saw as the work of the gods with faithfulness. Others, though, who believed they knew better, used their fellow man's convictions to enforce a destiny for their own pleasure. If there is an example of a class distinction, of a separation, of education and a worldview, look no further than the legions of Pannonia, who once surrendered to the moon, as shared to us by Roman senator and historian Tacitus in his left behind Annals. The Roman Republic was gone, and with it, its leaders, legions, and citizens found themselves recovering from a power vacuum across their land. The sun and moon rose upon a new era of Rome, now as an empire. The very first leader of this era, Emperor Augustus, had recently passed away, leaving his laws to be upheld by the Senate, his statues to be uplifted alongside the gods, and his son, Tiberius, to hold his position as emperor. Emperor Augustus' death sent shockwaves throughout the young empire, circulating and spreading across the roads and villages. It finally reached the legions stationed in Pannonia, near Rome's eastern borders. The soldiers stationed in the camps found the news as shocking as the rest of Rome, but they did not simply mourn his death. They saw it as an opportunity. Since the emperor was dead, it was assumed a new leader would rise to take his place. They understood themselves to be in the midst of a power vacuum. Officially, the leader was Tiberius, his son. To the legions in Pannonia, though, it was whoever gave them an easier life. They began demanding better rights and a financially favorable end to their long, cold, and stamina-depleting military tour across the Roman Empire. They knew as much as we do about history, that when a Roman consul or a popular political leader is exiled or killed, legions across the empire are the first ones consulted with a sudden change of power. It is a lot easier for a new leader to exert his influence and control over his subjects when the military is breathing down their necks, or in the outcome of a victorious civil war. Our guide through this story, Roman historian and senator Tacitus, writes that the main reason he found for the motivation of this mutiny was to make a profit out of the change of power. The legions knew that the emperor would require their unwavering support, so the opportunity was perfect to start complaining about discipline, wages, and freedom, and they complained loudly. Both young and old soldiers, in extraordinary speeches and displays, told of harrowing, abusive centurion discipline, showing their battle-hardened bodies filled with scars not given by their German enemies across the border, but from their very own commanders. One soldier named Pausanias rallied the soldiers with a speech, where he asked the riled crowd, whom he compared to slaves, quote, When will you dare to demand relief if you do not go with your prayers or arms to a new and yet tottering throne? We have blundered enough of our tameness for so many years, and having to endure 30 or 40 campaigns till we grow old, most of us with bodies maimed by wounds. Even dismissal is not the end of our service. Quartered under a legion's standard, we toil through the same hardships under another title. If a soldier survives so many risks, he is still dragged into remote regions where, under the name of lands, he receives soaking swamps and mountainous wastes. Our only relief can come from military life being entered upon at fixed conditions, from receiving each the pay of a denarius, and from the 16 years terminating our service. Bricinius went on to compare their service to those in the Roman capital, questioning their pay in comparison with the emperor's guards. They spoke together of their low pay and the high number of years they were required to serve the state. After all, they thought, it was their offensive missions against the Gauls and the Germans and their defensive positions in Pannonia that was keeping the empire together. The soldiers finally agreed to have the son of an elected official named Blasius to request a release of the soldiers' service to the state after their full completion of 16 years. As Blasius' son made his way to the Roman capital, another Roman soldier back in the winter camps of Pannonia began rallying men for violence. His name was Vibiolanus, and he claimed one of the mercenary soldiers in support of the legion was assassinated by Blasius' slaves, who accompanied him when he visited the legions. Answer, Blasius, where you have flung aside the corpse. Even an enemy grudges not burial. Vibiolanus asked. Vibiolanus and other soldiers began interrogating the other slaves to find the body, to the point of torturing them. They ravaged through Blasius' tent, making many alarmed at an impending war in the camps. Upon hearing their complaints, as well as the growing level of violence among the mutiny towards Blasius and his slaves, Emperor Tiberius sent his son Drusus, a few politicians, a security team consisting of 2 praetorian cohorts, and a letter personally written by him. Drusus came before the legions, while his men silently lurked around their tents to squash any sudden disarray. He pulled out the letter and began reading it aloud. The letter, according to Tacitus, informed the legions that the emperor was mindful of the legion's service and requests, but that he himself was still recovering from the grief of losing his father, Augustus. He explained that he would pass on their complaints to the Senate to resolve their long-term needs, but that anything short-term could be resolved by his son, Drusus. The letter did not please the soldiers at all. Their numerous demands would be put on hold until the Senate was given the chance to discuss the matter, but they wanted change now, not later. The legions began repeating their demands, and Drusus referred to the letter again as his response, quickly testing the crowd's patience. They continued to complain together about Drusus and the unmet demands, now inquiring how the Senate, rather than the emperor, would be able to satisfy their hopes of escaping abusive centurions or grant them a shorter service in the army. They mocked the chain of command, saying, quote, "Was then the same Senate to be consulted whenever notice was given of an execution or a battle? Were their rewards to be at the discretion of absolute rulers, their punishments to be without appeal?" Fear began to rise in Drusus's party, and to the legions, the opportunity for change through peace looked as far away as their messengers were. As night came upon the whole scene of soldiers that were gathered, Drusus and his party slowly and quietly began preparations to leave and head back to his father in the Senate. One centurion of the camp, Cneius Lentulus, seeing the danger upon himself in the camp as he had been a known supporter of harsh discipline, started to silently leave with Drusus and his party, only to be detected and halted by the legions. They surrounded him and asked him again and again whither he was going. Was it to the emperor or to the Senate? there also to oppose the interests of the legions. At the same moment they menaced him savagely and flung stones, and now, bleeding from a blow, and feeling destruction certain, he was rescued by the hurried arrival of the throng which had accompanied Drusus. The situation, argued Tacitus, now threatened an explosion of crime. Drusus himself could be killed amidst the fighting and bring about a new civil war, as he was the son of the emperor. The whole empire brought forth by the Caesars, the people of Rome, and the legions, was at stake during this very night. One can only imagine the fear that would have gripped Drusus as well as the older soldiers who knew exactly where this could go, remembering the stories from the Republic full of bloodshed. The emperor's son, coming back wounded or dead, would not go well for the legions, nor for the future of the young empire. But suddenly, before mass destruction could be unfolded, the passions for violence were, as Tacitus puts it, tranquilized by a mere accident. As they were arguing and rallying each other up, with swords being readied, a cloud went forth over the moon, dimming its light, and amid the nightly scene, this event radically affected them. Quote, "Suddenly, in a clear sky, the moon's radiance seemed to die away. This the soldiers, in their ignorance of the cause, regarded as an omen of their condition, comparing the failure of her light to their own efforts, and imagining that their own attempts would end prosperously should her brightness or splendor be restored to the goddess. And so they raised a din with brazen instruments and combined notes of trumpets and horns, with joy or sorrow, as she brightened or grew dark. When clouds arose and obstructed their sight, and it was thought that she was buried in the gloom, they lamented that this was a portent of never-ending hardship, and that heaven frowned upon their deeds." At this change of emotions among the legions, Drusus used the short period of opportunity to calm the most vocal. He commanded his men to go around the camp and persuade them to wait for the Senate's response, and asked how exactly they planned to satisfy the soldiers' demands without the Senate or emperor. It surprisingly worked. The rebellious soldiers moved back to their stations. The situation became calm again, with Drusus gaining enough support among the soldiers to even punish the leaders of the mutiny, Fabulinus and Persinius. The soldiers were deeply shaken by the moon. As fellow Roman historian Cassius Dio writes, "They took the omen to heart, and their spirits abated." We can only ponder the psychology of the rebellious soldiers' sudden burst into celebration and lament as the moon stood silently over them. The Romans saw the moon, Luna, as a ruler of the celestial realm, along with the sun, Sol, and the surrounding stars, Hyperion, and the sky, which together were a family of the pantheon of gods. The moon, like the sun and stars, represented a godly figure in the Roman pantheon, and the goddess Luna, who gave the Romans growth, healing, fertility, and dreams. It may be that, upon seeing the goddess be repeatedly dimmed and brightened again and again by the clouds, they assumed that she was calling for their attention and was offering a sign to stop what they were doing. But as there were many soldiers with numerous different backgrounds, I wonder if some held alternative reasons to back down and surrender to the moon. Consider if, for example, a soldier looking upon that moon would recall their previous occupation that it had deeply affected. Perhaps some of the vocal were farmers in earlier stages of life, and reminisced about how the moon and their culture engineered their fields by producing the dew of the crops and supporting the growth of trees. The moon, to those present in the empire as well as their ancestors in the Republic, was a guiding light in agricultural practices. Roman religious professor Eugene Taverne captures the deep relationship between the Roman farmer and the moon in a paper, saying, quote, "The careful Roman farmer consulted the moon when he dug his ditches, when he set his hens, and when he sheared his sheep, and when he had his hair cut." End quote. This close connection between the moon and their civilian activities had made them trust the light of it, So to see it dim suddenly before their actions must have made them feel remorse and perhaps pity for those that they were going to kill. Soldiers with background at sea could have had different thoughts rolling around their heads. Merchant sailors, before joining the military, had experienced the moon's luminous as it guided their ships upon dark waters. Perhaps they played back the days when it had eased their fears of being lost to the sea, with its light exposing their surroundings. With the moon being such a trusted guide among the waters, they could have considered its coverage from the clouds as an omen that this time its light was exposing them. Perhaps it was all these backgrounds at once working together, full of culture, music, memories, and sorrow, which had filled the scene, making this odd scene where a bunch of soldiers on the cusp of incredible destruction change their minds and start pulling out instruments instead of swords. As we have read from Tacitus and Cassiodeo, the Roman legions of Pannonia were swayed by the moon and manipulated by the state. Episodes such as this in the Annals of Rome's vast history allow us to explore the intriguing mind of the Roman politician and soldier regarding their relationship with deities. We see here that both the Roman rich politician and the common poor soldier saw an opportunity through the power they held. For Drusus, it was the religious connection with the deities that the Romans had revered and worshipped for centuries. He successfully exhorted the soldiers in their faith towards the gods by the mere luck of the moon. For the Roman legions, it was through the death of Emperor Augustus and the changes of power underneath them across the empire. They found that their strength together would bring the emperor to their attention and numerous demands. As we saw through this story of history, the superstitions surrounding the moon, as Tacitus calls it, overcame the strength and influence of a Roman legion that essentially surrendered its destiny to its light. Thank you for watching. I look forward to sharing more Roman as well as other civilization histories to this YouTube channel. Please feel free to subscribe, and remember that this is all based off my articles I've written and published on Substack, which I'll leave a link to in the description of this video.